Okay, I want to take a little bit of time today to talk about making the choice to let go of negative feelings towards other people in the relationships that we have in our life in order to improve the quality of relationships. And why I feel like this is so important to talk about is because a lot of the time, a relationship can be something where you get so much value out of it. It adds so much light into your life. It's something where a high quality friendship or a high quality intimate relationship or a family relationship, even a work relationship, even if it's just a colleague who you have a really good connection with, it can add so much light into your life. It can make your life so much more fun, so much more playful. You can borrow and learn so many things from that other person, and it enriches us on such a deep level. And it's sad to see sometimes that relationships fall apart, or there's just distance, or it becomes amendable because of like little, to be honest, like oftentimes like stupid, like petty things that get in the way of having a really vibrant, high quality connection with other people. I think that for almost all of us, that's something that we want deep down. It's a really heartfelt desire to have a loving, high quality, enduring connection with someone else or multiple people in our lives. I can definitely say that for myself. And what we tend to do in relationships is we place a lot of value and impetus, obviously, on the positive feeling states that we have with other people. So when things are going well, meaning that that person sort of fits into our vision and our understanding of reality, and we do the same with them, and we sort of validate one another's opinions and beliefs, and we offer things to one another, we help each other with our problems, and we maybe agree on things, maybe even we like the same films or the same books, we go to the same personal development seminars, whatever. We tend to have this affinity and this closeness that we value so much. But then when a relationship deepens and becomes more complex, you start to become privy to all of the different sides of the person, and they start to become privy to many different sides of you. And what's going to inevitably happen with any complex relationship, with any really high value relationship, is because you're getting so much more of that person from different angles, there start to be disparities over time. You start to notice that you have differences, and it might be nothing to do with them. Maybe just that day you were not in the right place and you interacted and they said something. They maybe didn't acknowledge you in the way that you wanted to be acknowledged, or vice versa with them. And then it causes this distance and conflict. And if we don't really know how to properly deal with that, what can actually, it's really sad to see this happen. And I've experienced this with people. If you don't actually know how to deal with the conflict, or you don't have the sort of like the self-awareness to recognize what went wrong where, the relationship can just sort of form a distance, and then you start to form a negative association with that person. And before you know it, the relationship is just, it's not really there anymore. It's kind of disappeared, or something seems amendable about it. And this might go on for like fucking 10 or 15 or 20 years. Or you might never really connect with that person again. What otherwise could have been a really high quality, fruitful relationship that offered you so much love and joy and companionship, where you could share with that other person and they could share with you. You could share the journey of life together. It has been destroyed over something that's really petty. And what I want to suggest in this video is that these negative emotions, these negative feelings, they don't actually have to get in the way of your having that kind of relationship. I've just noticed this in myself enough times now to be able to say this confidently. That only happens when you come up against a certain resistance in yourself and you let the smaller, more bitter, petty aspects of you feed off of that. And you're not actually able to come to the point where you can forgive the other person, or that you can release these aspects from inside of you. And it's often because when they start to come up, it's so painful for us, and it could be to do with past wounds that we've had in life. Like sometimes someone will say something and it doesn't actually seem like a big deal to them, or on the surface it doesn't seem like a big thing, but to us it can hit us in a really core wound. It can maybe really hit something that's been going on for us for a long time maybe. And then what happens is we've made such a negative association with that situation. I'm a poet and didn't know it, apparently. We've made such a negative association to them and that thing that's happened, that we've conflated them as a whole person just with that feeling that we don't want to face. And then we're sort of blocked off because we don't want to go near that feeling. And we try to suppress it, we repress it, and we blame. We project and blame, and we act like it's their fault entirely. And then something in us actually does this thing where we start to kind of feed off of that petty sense of being right. So we have so much to gain from that relationship. Like I said before, like the love, the companionship, the closeness, the sharing, experiencing life together. There's so much there, it's enormous, and it just keeps growing. It's kind of an exponential brightness, a high quality relationship. But instead, we settle for this like breadcrumb, this petty little fucking breadcrumb. And what that breadcrumb is it's the sense of like, I'm right and you did the wrong thing and I'm not gonna forgive you because I'm right. And there's this pride that gets caught up. It's actually, if you can start to feel the energy of what I'm saying, it's actually really gross. And what I want to suggest is that if this is the way that we handle that relationship, what's probably going to happen is it's how we're going to handle the next one. And if we only have relationships with people where we can only extend love and kindness and forgiveness and ease towards the other person, and vice versa, if someone can only extend those qualities to us when we agree with them or when that person agrees with us and when they fit into our paradigm, then the relationship it's not really as comprehensive as we think. So what I'm going to say is if you have kind of a negativity that you feel like is festering there in your relationships with other people, just as an experiment, like even if you just have to let go of your being right or kind of like blaming the other person just for 10 minutes or whatever. And notice there is going to be a voice in you, like if you resonate with this, there's going to be a part of you that really does actually feel as though like, no, they're wrong. And like, because that victim mentality can be really strong. For me, it's been really strong at different points. With family, for example, there's family members I've just not wanted to forgive for certain things. And it's probably shaved years off of us having a potentially fruitful relationship just because I wanted to hold on to that guilt, or sort of like guilting them or being right, and that like letting that resentment win. What I want to suggest to you is, if you just did an experiment where you put that aside for the moment and you just notice, what is the feeling here that I'm actually avoiding? Instead of trying to get them to acknowledge me, what actually is this thing that I'm really struggling with here? And it can be so simple. Like this is something that I noticed recently. So this is how much of a mind fuck this can be. This is how simple it can actually be. You've got like hours worth of negative thoughts and like distance built up in this relationship. And it can be, when you actually trace back to where that came from and why you feel like that, and you do that genuinely in yourself, it can be as simple as, they didn't acknowledge this one thing that I said. So again, you can have a whole blunder that's taken weeks of time of negative thoughts and associations and planning to end the relationship or whatever. It can be as simple as drawing it back to, I didn't feel acknowledged in this conversation where I opened up or I shared something. Isn't that crazy? It can be as small as that. And that's not to say that's insignificant. It's important to be acknowledged, but just because in that moment we might have been carrying something and we didn't feel acknowledged, or the other person might have done the same thing with us, it can create that much conflict in our relationship. We have all that to lose just over that little crumb of negativity there. And then when we actually look at that, what we start to see is that it doesn't really have to do with that other person at all. It has to do with that sense of not feeling acknowledged in ourselves, but we don't want to face that. So what I would say is, again, just as an experiment, if we put down that sense of being right just for like 5 minutes and just allow that feeling tone, that emotion of not being acknowledged to come up to the surface, and what it actually feels like, that lack of acknowledgement. And just sitting with it, not doing anything with it, not trying to do like some release technique or some breath work, none of that. Just allowing that to be there fully and just welcoming that feeling and that lack of acknowledgement in the moment. And just trying that for 5 minutes. And you can do it right now. You want to pause the video if this is something you're dealing with. It might be a subtler form. I'm giving it in a more overt example here, but Just for 5 minutes, allowing yourself to come in contact with that sense of that lack of acknowledgement. Just allowing that to be there. And what's interesting is when you start to let go of that a little bit, you start to feel that dissipate. It's almost like the channel between you and the other person clears up without you even having to talk about this with them. You could, and sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it's really good to have the conversation. But it's interesting to note how sometimes you don't even need to. It's like this kind of weird, like a bit woo-woo, getting a bit woo-woo here. Sometimes just the fact that you cleared that up between you and you felt different, or you forgave them and you realized that it was actually to do with you and you took accountability for the way that you felt. It's interesting to watch what can happen in your relationship just because you did that. Sometimes it can actually be quite phenomenal what can happen next time you speak to the person. It's like you're in a complete different place with them. And why is that? Why are we in a complete different place just because we acknowledge that feeling? It's because the thing that was actually between us and the other person was actually the resistance that we were feeling to that feeling itself, rather than it being them. It was a resistance to the feeling masquerading as a projection on their part, and a sense of lack and a sense of needing something from them. It was the smallness in us pining for attention and for food, and then flipping that around and letting the greater aspect of ourselves actually heal that element of resistance. And what that does, it opens up and creates a clear channel of connection between us and the other person. And then before we know it, the relationship can resume as it needs to. Maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe it was just recognizing that, and worst case scenario, the relationship doesn't resume and it's over, but yet we still don't have to live with a sense of tension and conflict, and we can forgive the other person just for the lightness of our own being. So hopefully this is something that you can relate. This is something that's been a big deal for me, because I've noticed that sometimes I've just held on to something massive with someone, and it's so weird. Again, just taking a minute to recognize that you don't need to. And when you let it go in yourself, there's so much more freedom that you can experience just within yourself that can have a healing effect on the relationship. Like I said, worst case scenario, maybe it doesn't, and you just personally get to live without that tension or without that conflict with the other person. And that's obviously of benefit in itself. But yeah, this is just another perspective. I just felt like kind of shooting this today. I didn't really have much going on, and I was like, I haven't made a YouTube video in a bit. So if you got value out of this, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing this with anyone you feel like would get value out of it. I am going to be popping back on camera. I'm making some free associative videos soon. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and that's me.